At the same time in history as the Jesuits were suppressed, the American Revolution occurred. Many believe this was no accident, but an act of God.
I see the suppression of the Jesuits as providential, because without the suppression of the Jesuit order, there is no successful American Revolution, period. We have to understand that the Protestants and the Baptists of Europe had been persecuted in excess of 200 years, crying out to the Lord for some place to live where they could worship Him and seek His face and be obedient to His word. That nothing else was more important to them than that. And so as a result, the Lord answered their prayers and opened up North America to them in the 1600s, but ultimately to get a government that would protect them in their rights of freedom of worship, freedom of press, freedom of conscience, freedom of self-defense, in what came to be the American Bill of Rights and then, of course, the U.S. Constitution. So without the suppression of the Jesuit order, there is no escape for us out of Europe into North America to start a free nation where we can worship God according to the dictates of our conscience.
As the Americans were determining and setting up a constitution where Protestant principles would reign, where freedom of religion would reign, where people would have the right to bear arms, where people would have a right to a fair trial, where all of these principles are being laid down, the Jesuit order is abolished. If the Jesuit order had not been abolished in 1773, and as they watched a Protestant country rising up in the Western Hemisphere, the Jesuit order would have used not only England, who they did use in the American Revolution, they would have used France, they would have used Spain, they would have used Portugal, because those were all Catholic countries. They would have used all those countries to destroy this growing Protestant nation, and it would never have been established.
Having had their power and influence greatly diminished, the Jesuits were unable to stop the American colonies from establishing a Protestant republic. That is to say, the Jesuits were in no condition to coordinate a crusade against the new Protestant republic as they had done with England in 1588 by using the Spanish Armada. But the Jesuits had one ace in the hole. Many of the founding fathers were deists and Freemasons. They attended church services and publicly paid homage to the God of the Bible. But in reality, they did not believe in miracles or the divinity of Jesus Christ. Their God was the great architect of the universe, not the God of the Bible. Thomas Jefferson went so far as to create his own Bible by cutting out verses he agreed with and pasting them into a blank book. The verses Jefferson believed in were those where Jesus speaks of morality and loving others. Miracles, such as the virgin birth or Jesus' resurrection, were omitted since they were considered fables. Freemasons like Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Paine had little regard for the divine, miracle-working Jesus of the Bible. Thomas Paine, author of the famous pamphlet Common Sense, wrote a book called The Age of Reason. In it, Paine says, Jesus Christ wrote no account of himself. The history of him is altogether the work of other people. And as to the account given of his resurrection and ascension, it was the necessary counterpart to the story of his birth. His historians, having brought him into the world in a supernatural manner, were obliged to take him out again in the same manner. Thus, when it came time to create a document that would unite these colonies into one country, the Jesuits had an idea many preferred. It was called religious liberty. The First Amendment to the Constitution would allow all religions to exist in America, not just religions based on the Protestant Bible. In the new American Republic, Roman Catholicism was allowed to coexist with the Protestant denominations, as well as the deistic Freemasons. But most importantly, the Roman Catholics were allowed to vote just like any other citizens. This was key, as we shall see later on. For as their numbers increased, Roman Catholics could put in power other Roman Catholics, or those who were sympathetic to them, and changed the nation from within.
After the Revolutionary War, voting rights of Catholics did change. We know that one of the signers of the Constitution was a Roman Catholic. There was only one, Mr. Carroll, but nonetheless it made it look like a place for Roman Catholics to come, as well as Protestants to have religious liberty, which is absurd. The Roman Catholic people had been used by the priests to kill us for centuries, and so why not stay in Europe? Well, they were being used by the Jesuits to come here to ultimately then take over political power and then submit North America to the feet of the Pope.
Turning from the happenings with the American colonies, let us take a moment to investigate what the Jesuits were up to in Europe after their suppression. As we might guess, the Jesuits were not idle. They decided to seek revenge against those who had turned on them, specifically a traitorous Pope and the Catholic monarchs of Europe. In 1774, a year after the Jesuits were disbanded forever,
Pope Clement XIV had suppressed the Jesuits, and a short time later he was poisoned. Poison is a big thing with these guys.
Pope Clement stated, "Alas, I knew they would poison me, but I did not expect to die in so slow and cruel a manner." A post-mortem examination of his body revealed the presence of a poison. Thus, the Jesuits rid themselves of a troublesome pope. The vendetta on the Catholic monarchs of Europe was approached in a less obvious manner. Cleverly, the Jesuits determined not to act in their own name, but decided to work through front groups and to have them take the blame for their revenge. In this way, the Jesuits would continue to appear to be disbanded and innocent of any involvement in the matter. The first front group the Jesuits used was called the Illuminati. The Illuminati was organized in Bavaria by a Jesuit professor, Adam Weishaupt, on May 1, 1776, just 3 years after the Jesuits were disbanded. Many sources only casually mention that Weishaupt was a former Jesuit, and they usually state he was an ex-Jesuit. In reality, Weishaupt never left the order. As for the order itself, it never was truly disbanded.
In Bavaria, when the Illuminati was founded in 1776 by Adam Weishaupt, Weishaupt is used by the Jesuits then to continue the work of the Jesuit order under another name. Weishaupt never repudiated the Jesuits. That's a lie of many, many conspiratorial historians controlled by the Pope. They want to create this dichotomy between the Illuminati and the Jesuits. Never fall for it. Weishaupt was operating under orders from a superior, Ritchie at the time, who was the general, then later another superior. But Weishaupt then enters into an alliance with the House of Rothschild. So now we see the Rothschilds, the Jewish Rothschilds, Red Shield, become the bankers for the Jesuit order during the upheaval we will know as the French Revolution and Napoleonic Wars. So this alliance between the Jesuits and the House of Rothschild, these high-level Masonic Jews, is very important to realize at this point because we have to live with it and deal with it today. Also, Bavaria is the stronghold of the Jesuits. There was a huge inquisitional torture chamber there in Nuremberg. Interesting that the Nuremberg trials of the Nazis would be held there.
And the very principles of the Illuminati, the way the organization was run, it's the very principles of the Jesuit order, and that's found in Nesta Webster's book called Secret Societies.
In 1814, Francois Charles de Berkheim reported on Germany's secret societies and stated, "The oldest and most dangerous association is that which is generally known under the denomination of the Illumines, and of which the foundation goes back towards the middle of the last century. Bavaria was its cradle. It is said that it had for founders several chiefs of the order of the Jesuits." Through the Illuminati, the Jesuits sought to take over various powerful secret societies, especially the higher degrees of Freemasonry.
If you study all of the different organizations in the world, whether it be the Knights of Malta, the Bilderbergers, the Club of Rome, the Council on Foreign Relations, as you study all these different groups, and the Knights of Malta would be included in that, you find that they are like a buffer behind which the Jesuit order operates.
In his book, Proofs of a Conspiracy, John T. Robison wrote concerning the Masonic lodges. At this time, 1798, the Jesuits interfered considerably, insinuating themselves into the lodges. Robison went on to say, "This society is well known to have put on every shape and to have made use of every mean that could promote the power and influence of the order. And we know that at this time they were by no means without hopes of re-establishing the dominion of the Church of Rome in England." And with the Illuminati and the higher orders of Freemasonry, the Jesuits fomented the destruction of the very monarchs who had opposed them, beginning with the French Revolution and later with Napoleon Bonaparte.
Well, the French Revolution was launched and waged by the Jesuits using Grand Orient Freemasonry and Scottish Rite Freemasonry in England for the purpose of punishing the Roman Catholic monarchs of Europe, taking back the Vatican Empire from the Pope, tearing away the colonies from England, Protestant England. They were doing several things at one time. Remember, the Jesuits are the great Hegelians. They can think along 10, 20, 50 different lines at the same time and coordinate them all together. So to understand what we do, we have to think dialectically. We can never think linearly. So the purpose of the French Revolution, first and foremost, was to punish the Roman Catholic monarchs of Europe. And that they did. What happened? Why, they beheaded Louis XVI, the grandson of Louis XV. We're going to teach you Bourbons of France who you mess with when you suppress the Jesuits. And then we're going to behead his wife, Marie Antoinette. And she was the daughter of Maria Theresa. She was a Habsburg. So we're going to punish you Habsburgs. You suppress us, we're going to cut off the head of Marie Antoinette using our Jacobins. And then you Braganzas of Portugal, we're going to drive you into exile using Napoleon. They did. They had to go into South America. And you Bourbons of Spain, we're going to drive you into exile too. We're going to have Napoleon set up a little banana republic up here in Spain. And then the Knights of Malta, how dare you kick us off your island of Malta in 1768? We're going to teach you a lesson. So they took Napoleon down here with his huge fleet, took all the treasures of the Knights of Malta and took all their weapons so that they could use that in the invasion of Egypt, at which time the Jesuits used Napoleon to kill all the Mamelukes, the bodyguard of the Caliph of Egypt. So now they're waging war against Islam like they are today.